Hello, Florence, my wonderful granddaughter. Happy birthday to you, number 7. I have a special book to share with you for your birthday. It's going to take a few different episodes. It's called The Wolllstonecraft Detective Agency, The Case of the Missing Moonstone. I love a good mystery. And it's by Jordan Stratford and art by Kelly Murphy. Before we begin, I'm in my school. I'm in a back room where it's quiet after school. I decided to do that before I go run some errands, to do some recording for you. Okay, let's begin. This takes place in London, far away, in the year 1826. So this is a map of the city a long time ago. Preface. This is a made-up story about two very real girls. Ada Byron, who was called the world's first computer programmer, and Mary Shelley, the world's first science fiction author. Ada and Mary didn't really know each other, nor did they have a detective agency together. Mary and Ada were 18 years apart in age, not 3 as they are in the world of Wollstonecraft. Setting that aside, these characters themselves are true to history, as true as we are able to tell. At the end of the book, there are notes that reveal more about what happened to each of them in real life, so that you can enjoy the history as much as I hope you'll enjoy this story, because the history bit is brilliant. Jordan Stratford. Chapter 1, The Ridiculous Hat. Force equals mass times acceleration, muttered Ada as she wrote in her notebook. Ada pondered that if you drop a hammer on your foot, it hurts more than dropping, say, a sock on your foot. The acceleration, or speeding up, is the same, but the mass, the solid oomph of the thing, is different. Oomph times zoom equals kaboom. Ada and her pondering were cocooned in a square wicker box that resembled a big, giant picnic basket, just tall enough for her to stand up in and long enough for her to lay down in. Light entered through round, brass-ringed windows and lit up stacks of books, rolls of paper, the odd screwdriver, and a bundle of pencils. The basket hung from thick ropes beneath a vast patchwork balloon that often swayed savagely in the wind. And the whole contraption was tethered with more ropes to the roof of Ada's Marylebone house in the heart of London. So let's take a look at that picture. So there you see it. So she's lives in this house here, and you can see, where's my finger? I'm always mixed up when I try to, there it is. There's the hot air balloon, the basket, and it looks like, Ada, right there. Grandma's out of practice. The balloon was one of Ada's best inventions. It was filled with hot air from the house's many chimneys, which Ada funneled into it via numerous pipes bolted together. Taken as a whole, pipes, ropes, basket, and balloon, it gave the impression that the stately house was wearing a sort of ridiculous hat. Ada lay stretched out on the gondola's floor in her favorite cherry velvet dress, which stopped a full inch above her ankles and showed wear and the odd black grease stain. Her hair was dark brown, almost black, and pulled back into a bun, with little wisps here and there trying to make a run for it. What if, Ada wondered in her wicker box, you could accelerate a sock? What if the sock were moving so fast that it could have the same force as a hammer? Would it hurt the same? How fast would the sock have to go? And how could you make a sock go that fast? Ada thought like this all the time. And to capture her thoughts, she made drawings, little sketches in notebooks, or on scraps of paper, or on table linens, or once at a very dull picnic, and much to the displeasure of her recently former governess, Miss Coverlet, on Ada's new dress. The drawing of the moment was a sock cannon of Ada's invention. The sock cannon was taking shape on paper and in between Ada's ears. But as busy as her ears were containing the sock cannon plans, she could make out the sound of a carriage approaching the Marylebone house. Grabbing a brass telescope that had been rolling on the floor with the swaying of the basket, she stood and flipped open the hatch. She climbed up the 3-step rope ladder to the basket's short deck, from which she could see as far as Oxford Street. She could see down Wimpole and Welbeck, Wesley and Westmoreland, down Weymouth and Cavendish and Queen Anne, and even the little lanes off Baker Street. Only she and the crows knew her neighborhood in this way from above. Her stomach tightened. Walking across busy Marylebone Road, carpet bags in hand, went Miss Coverlet for the last time, leaving Ada alone for good. Ada had to admit that alone was not entirely accurate. The house in London was staffed by 2 women whose names she could never quite remember. Mrs. Cabbage and Cummerbund, or possibly Arugula and Aubergine, and honestly, she had no idea. When food arrived, with the exception of bread and butter, she'd help herself in the upstairs kitchen. It was the hands of Miss Coverlet, or Ada's very tall and entirely silent butler, Mr. Franklin. And then the dishes went away, seemingly by themselves, to a place where she supposed something or other must happen to them. But as far as Ada was concerned, without Miss Coverlet, whom Ada had known all her life, who had comforted her scrapes and answered her questions and fetched her favorite books and made sure her stockings weren't scratchy, something Ada hated rather desperately, yes, Ada would feel utterly alone. At 11, Ada was deemed too old for a governess and was now to have a tutor instead. A tutor! Ada knew it was impossible for any living person to educate her. For that, she had her books. Books for learning, books for distraction, books for company, books for making sense of things. Ada's books were full of facts and figures, diagrams and calculations. Books that were not to be argued with. Books that stayed put when you needed them to and didn't run off and get married, as Miss Coverlet was off to do, which seemed to Ada like the stupidest idea ever. In most matters, Ada was a genius. Once the facts and figures and charts and calculations from her books wandered into her head, they never left it. Even when she was a baby, Ada had loved number games and puzzles. She fixed things that were broken and then began fixing things that weren't broken, or broke things so that they could be fixed in ways no one ever understood and found particularly convenient. But the one puzzle she couldn't solve was people. To Ada, they all seemed to be broken in ways she couldn't make sense of and couldn't fix. Right now, there was a puzzle of her heart which was breaking as Miss Coverlet stepped aboard the carriage. "I'm going to my balloon," Ada had said when informed of Miss Coverlet's departure that morning. She supposed that Miss Coverlet might have mentioned getting married before, but Ada hadn't realized that meant she'd be leaving, or that leaving meant alone, and she certainly hadn't known Miss Coverlet would be leaving today. Ada knew that if she was to be alone, then the drawing room, with its grand wallpaper and curly-cued gilt frames, its lush Indian carpet and scattering of delicate china, was not where alone was going to happen. Miss Coverlet had watched Ada turn and leave, stomping just a little bit for show. Miss Coverlet had seen some very expert stomping from Ada over the years, and this stomping seemed half-hearted. Indeed, as Ada now watched Miss Coverlet leave in the carriage, she felt that she had only half a heart left. Ada had barely returned to her cannon plans when she heard a great black lion's head knocker strike the front door. Whoever it was had best go away. She wanted to be left alone. Alone as Miss Coverlet had left her. Here in her safe wicker fort, beneath her balloon, tethered with strong nautical rope to the topmost peak of her house, while she knew she should slide down the rope to the widow's walk and swing into the attic window as she had done 100 times before. She felt safest here, basket swaying, with her inventions and her books and her drawings. No, she would not come down. Not ever. Let's see. I'm wondering when we should pause with these chapters. That seemed like a good place. How many minutes have I been reading? 10 minutes? Let's keep going. Awkward and uncomfortable is this chapter 2. Clinging for dear life to a rope atop the Byron house, Percy could not believe that he had missed this from the street. He looked up and contemplated the hot air balloon with the large square wicker box attached beneath it. It was a bit windy, and he was not really wearing the right sort of shoes for roof climbing, and certainly not for rope climbing.
When it comes to soccer or football, depending on which side of the pond you're on, AFC Richmond may struggle to find a victory, but Ted Lasso won.
Well, that was weird. Can you believe it? That was a little weird. Let's keep going. My computer is bonkers. The whole situation was not only markedly unusual, but also awkward and uncomfortable. He decided to call up to the balloon. "Lady Byron," Percy called. "Lady Ada?" "Go away," said a small but determined voice from the wicker box. Please do allow me to introduce myself. I am Mr. Snagsby, your new tutor." "Go away," said the voice, this time with even more determination. "I'm to be your new tutor," he shouted over the wind. "I have a letter here from the Baroness Wentworth. Your mother?" "Are you daft, or are you just deaf?" inquired the voice from beneath the hot air balloon. "Well, I'm afraid it's a bit windy up here, which can make it a bit difficult to hear exact words, particularly as you're speaking from within what appears to be a gondola of sorts. A gondola is what you call that basket under a hot air balloon." "I know what a gondola is. I have one," said the voice. Percy continued, only slightly deterred. "Well, what I could make out were the words 'go' and 'away.'" "Ah, so not so deaf then?" No, I'm not. I'm afraid not. So just daft then," deduced the voice. "I say, that's not terribly fair," huffed Percy. There he is. This is her new tutor. Oops, let's go this way. Right here. He's on the roof. She's not happy to meet him. I love the old-fashioned clothing. "Not fair? Not fair?" roared the voice from the box. The hatch popped up, and Ada's head appeared, her hair even more disheveled than usual. "I'll tell you what's not fair. It's not fair that Miss Coverlet had to go marry stupid Cecil. It's not fair that she's not here and you are. It's not fair that my mother has gone to live in the country. It's not fair that I can't just be left alone." "Lady Ada, if I'm to be your tutor—" "You're not. Go away. There's no one for you to toot." "I'm quite certain that's not a word," offered Percy. "Why not? Plumbers plumb, waiters wait, butlers buttle, tutors toot." "Butlers don't—" "You're impossible!" yelled Ada, who disappeared back into the wicker fort and slammed the hatch. Percy was not, in fact, daft, but he did feel rather daft at the moment, his shoes slipping on the roof tiles as he clung to a knotted rope and stared up at his pupil, who was firmly shut in a large wicker box. He was startled by the loud clang of a ship's bell right outside the attic window. He hadn't noticed the bell before, but he certainly had noticed Mr. Franklin, the house's extraordinarily tall and curiously silent butler, who now struck the bell once more. A window popped open on the side of the basket, and the lens of a clicking brass telescope emerged. Ada clearly wanted to see what the bell heralded without having to address Percy. Mr. Franklin extended both hands out the window, one palm up as if to offer something, and the other making a winding motion, as though turning a crank. So like this, right? "It's Mr. Babbage!" Ada cried with delight from within the basket. The hatch flew open, and Ada tossed out the rope ladder, scrambled down, nearly knocking Percy off the roof into the street. Percy slid and clutched desperately at the knotted rope, recovering in time to see a rather worn, stained, and outgrown dress clamber over the windowsill and slip into the attic. With no further reason to remain on the roof, although the view was extraordinary, Percy followed, taking it rather personally that clearly not all of Lady Astor's visitors were met with disdain. Once he was over the windowsill, he fully expected to find himself alone in the attic. It was dusty as attics ought to be, for mysteriously attic-y reasons. There were other things one would expect. Furniture in ghost costumes of big white sheets, a hobby horse long outgrown, large steamer trunks bearing unknown treasures. It also held both Mr. Franklin and Ada, who had momentarily suspended her excitement over Mr. Babbage's arrival to examine the leather case Percy had left there before heading onto the roof. "What's in there?" asked Ada. "Books," replied Percy. "What sort of books?" "All sorts. History, language, poetry." "I hate poetry," Ada insisted. "You are not to." "Not to what?" she asked. "Not to hate poetry." He was quite emphatic about this point, which got Ada's attention. "But there are other books? Chemistry, mathematics?" "Mathematics? By whom? What do you have in there?" With that, Ada sat on the floor and began fiddling with the case's brass clasp, finding it locked. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to the small brass plate by the handle. "PBS. What does that mean?" "That's my monogram, my initials. Percy B. Snagsby. It's my name." "Oh, why did you do that? Why did I put my monogram on my case? To make it more mine, I suppose." "Huh," said Ada. It was hard to determine, but it seemed to Percy a rather approving "huh," as far as "huhs" go. "All right, Peebs, you may show me your books. After." "Peebs?" said Percy. "PBS. Peebs, that's your name. Anyway, it shall have to wait until later." "I'm sorry. After what, Lady Ada?" "After Mr. Babbage, of course. He only comes once a week, so you'll have to wait." And with a cheerfulness that nearly knocked Percy off of his feet, Ada ran to the door and down the stairs. Percy looked over at the looming butler. "Odd," he said. "I was under the impression the young lady was not fond of visitors." Mr. Franklin raised an eyebrow, which silenced Percy completely. Oh my goodness. That was an interesting first 2 chapters, interrupted by my weird computer. But I hope you're starting to like Ada. She's got spunk. I like a character with spunk. Goodbye, my lovely.